Good morning, everybody. And as following, we would like to present you a case study, or actually case studies, which are based on widespread traditional technique for fresco-bound mural paintings. The tradition of demounting wall paintings has actually a long history, as you probably all know. Just as an example, majority of 18th century rediscovered wall paintings from Pompeii had ended up in the museum walls, and due to this fact have lost their historical authentic context. And that is also the reason why since mid-20th century the method is much discussed and not accepted anymore as a routine action for conservation. But in certain cases it is the only possibility to preserve the artwork, which is actually the case we will present you now. And actually, it's also very significant to give our presentation here in the Estonian National Museum, as one of the cases we are introducing ended up in the deposits of the museum somewhere on us. Probably they are staying now. But now I'm giving a word over to my younger colleagues who both participated in the projects, but later on we are all ready to answer your questions.
Thank you, Hilkka. So I will dwell more into the past, and Johanna will bring us back into the present. And I will start. The Soviet era created favorable conditions for the development of monumental art in Estonia. Many artworks were commissioned for state and public buildings. With the arrival of the independence, however, the murals of Soviet time often found themselves in the way of the construction boom. Many artworks were destroyed together with the buildings, and the reasons for this were economical but also political. One characteristic of this transition period is an incapacity for appreciating art born in the Soviet era. This situation raised the question, could the artworks be preserved separate from their architectural embodiment? We will discuss 3 such cases. Elmar Kits is undeniably one of the most distinguished artists of Soviet Estonia. His graffito-style mural, located in Tartu's old department store, was completed in 1965 and originally adorned the walls of the Tarvas restaurant. This nearly 20 square meter mural survived the change of the political system as well as the demise of the restaurant. 7 years ago, in 2010, discussions began concerning the plan to build a modern business center on the site of the old department store. By that time, all that remained of the restaurant's authentic interior was Kits's mural. The rooms themselves had been converted to a travel office. At the end of 2012, an architectural competition was held for finding the best solution for this whole city block. The competition terms included the requirement to preserve the mural in the new building, and an emotional discussion flared up in the press on how this could be achieved in a new complex that will not retain a single brick of the old building. Some even voiced an opinion that the demolition should be stopped. The mural itself is not subject to cultural heritage protection, and for this reason it was not possible to pressure the building's owner. A similar precedent was set in the course of the demolition of the building of Estonian Academy of Arts in 2010, when the school's conservation department successfully demounted the more valuable part of the murals located in it. The walls of the school had been used as a training space for mural paintings by artists who have by now taken up dignified spaces in Estonian art scene. The salvation of the works took place while the demolition of the building was already in progress. Since this kind of complicated and aggressive way of preservation had not been practiced before in Estonia, the walls of the academy provided an excellent training ground for the students. On the other hand, this was also an excellent chance to play out the process of this technically pretentious method of preservation. 10 of the most valuable murals were successfully removed from the walls over the course of a couple of days. 2 layers of fabric were affixed to paintings with strong adhesive made from animal products, and after it had dried, the murals were removed in strips from the walls together with the support plaster and deposited in the warehouse. In a way, this salvage operation created a more positive image for the much discussed and criticized demolition work of the Academy of Arts. In May 2013, Tartu municipal government issued a permit for demolishing the buildings on the site of the old department store, but under the condition that the mural painting by kids be first transferred and preserved. But how to do that? The first plan, worked out by engineers, entailed preservation as a complete monolith, together with the wall supporting the painting. But this was considered technically too difficult to implement, and the wall alone would have weighed nearly 40 tons. A second plan was worked out by conservators in cooperation with engineers of the company Haspa Oy. It took about 3 months to proceed from the concept of the salvation works to the beginning of the works itself. But during that time, the technique was fine-tuned to prevent any errors. Even though previous work with the frescoes at the Academy of Arts provided certain experience, the deep relief of the three-dimensional surface of Kitz's mural made its removal considerably more complicated. Tentative experiments were carried out on the painting, and it was provisionally decided to use synthetic adhesives to affix the protective layers to the painting. Unexpectedly, however, it was discovered that some of the colors reacted with acetone, and for this reason it was decided to replace the synthetic adhesive with a glue of animal origin, which has also been the traditional medium for applying protective layers. The drawback is the use of large quantities of water on the painted surface, but our testing indicated that all the paints used in the mural are resistant to water. First, a layer of gauze that could easily be stuffed into all the grooves was applied to the surface of the painting using a water solution of about 20 to 25% rabbit skin adhesive. As a second layer, a strong cotton fabric was applied to the top of the gauze using the same adhesive to protect the entire surface of the painting as a uniform layer. In order to demount the mural, the scenes of the work were separated from one another, and the mounting began one by one. A separate protective frame was made of iron rods, and it was constructed for each of the sections. And after the fixation of the frame, the panel was covered with an additional plastic film. A protective surface made of strong plywood was then attached to the front side, and the gaps between the plywood and the plastic film were filled using stiffening foam in order to prevent any cracking in unsupported areas of the painting. Then the plaster was sawed through as close as possible to the brick wall, and the panel was lowered to the floor. After that, the back sides of the panels were covered with reinforcing an additional layer of plywood to complete its affixing. And in the end, we were left with 9 plaster suitcases in the room. The owners of the building did not wish to find a new place for displaying the artwork in Tartu's old department store's new building, and they ceremonially donated it to the Estonian National Museum, where we are today.
Hello. I will present you our third project, where we actually went a step further than in the previous 2. What Helen just described was only the first stage in preserving these works of art, because there's still no physical environment where to remount these paintings, in either the case of Estonian Academy of Arts or Tartu's old department store. But it's not until the second stage is completed, when paintings are once again attached to a wall and displayed in their new environment, that we can speak about the success of this project. And luckily we have one such case to present, where it is possible to describe the stage 2. And it is the case of the mural painting by, again, Elmar Kits, this time near Viljandi in Vanavõidu. The Viljandi Vocational Training Center faced a similar situation as the department store in Tartu. The trade school is located in a 19th century manor house, but since it was decided to restore the building's original look, they wanted to dismantle the extension that was built in the Soviet period, where the painting was situated. And now a decision had to be made on what to do with the mural in the building. To replace the classroom space lost by demolishing the Soviet-era building, the school had renovated an old stable and converted it into a new annex. The plan was to transfer all the artworks that once embellished the old schoolrooms to the new building. There were actually quite many of them, but luckily just one that was literally part of the architecture. And it was decided to demount it using the same technique as in Tartu. The decision to remove the painting from its original location came this time even somewhat easier because the original location was never considered very reasonable one. A year after the painting's execution, an art historian, Milvi Alas, described the room as dark and cramped in her article, saying that it's not appropriate for a work of art of that caliber. The mural in the vocational school offered a comparable challenge to Tartu's painting due to its similar relief-like surface. Although here the detaching process was expected to be easier due to the much smaller size of the work. It was only about 3 by 2 meters large. A bit worrisome was its more fragile paint surface and the plaster itself, which appeared not to contain much binder and seemed more brittle than in the painting of Tartu. But since the demounting of Tartu's painting had proceeded without incidents, it was decided to follow the same procedure. 2 layers of fabric were affixed to the painting with rabbit skin glue, a bit lower concentration this time, and the painting, cut only in half because it was small, was removed from the wall together with the plaster supporting it. But an important facet of the conservation concept was also to retain the portability that the artwork had gained during the detachment, so it could easily be transferred, if again needed, to another location. Hence, the first step was to prepare a supportive base plate for the painting to serve as intermediate layer between the mural and the wall. And the base plate was prepared with 2 layers of plywood, which were attached to one another with screws and wood adhesive. And then the base plate was coated with contact primer and covered with a layer of tile adhesive. And the mural, covered in turn with adherence dispersion from the rear, was then placed on the base plate. And when the tile adhesive was set, the protective plywood panels that were temporarily attached on the front side of the painting were removed, as was the assembly foam used to stabilize the grooves of the relief. And the base plate carrying the artwork was fixed to the wall with wedge anchors. And now came the moment of truth, removing the protective fabrics. This would reveal the actual level of success of this entire undertaking. And we decided to use hot steam instead of water for reactivating the rabbit skin glue in order to avoid the excessive use and absorption of water. And we could breathe a sigh of relief as the layers of fabric and gauze started to peel off the mural easily and revealed the painted surface almost intact. Only a small area, it's actually a really small area, in the lower right corner of the painting was somewhat damaged and it needed some consolidation and a little plaster repair. And slightly more time-consuming was the removal of glue residues from the painted surface. Again, the best tool for this proved to be the steamer and a large number of absorbent towels. Here's our colleague plastering the gap between the sections. The gap needed to be retouched, and we decided to do some retouchings all over the surface because there were small mechanical damages from the earlier period because it had been in the school building for decades. And here you can see the painting in its new environment. Much more spaces, much better lit, and you can actually step back to admire the work. And to conclude, we can say that there are quite many poorly constructed buildings that are functionless now in all post-Soviet countries, and demolishing them is quite common practice. And yet these buildings are often adorned with monumental art, and these artworks are therefore endangered. We just described the possibility how to save these artworks by removing them from their original supports. However, this conservation process may cause problems, and some disagreements might arise because of the violent nature of this undertaking and the authenticity of the artwork that has been ripped out of its original setting might be questioned. Furthermore, the complexity and the high cost of this type of conservation work may be an obstacle. And these projects, we can consider them as pilot projects, which proved that it is possible to demount even large-scale paintings with engraved surfaces from their original supports and remount them on a new support without significant damage. But at the same time, the high risk of this undertaking must be acknowledged, and the risk is increased by the diverse artistic practices of the Soviet period, such as varied plaster formulation and painting techniques. And in dealing with an artwork painted on dry plaster, as was common in Soviet art, some loss of paint is inevitable. But our conclusion is that demounting these wall paintings is a conservation method in which high risks are involved, but we are convinced that in situations where non-interference leads to certain destruction, these risks are worth taking. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies. You would like